So this is a talk on Android sensors drivers. So a quick overview of what my talk aims to present is what robot platform is the most convenient for beginning ROS users? Is it a Turtlebot 2? It's probably not the PR2. Or maybe the simulator is a pretty good option. So raise your hand if you brought a robot with you to RosCon. It counts if your employer did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. So up to 5 robots, but I know 3 of them were sharing one. So at most 2 or 3 robots. I think that Android devices are a great way to introduce ROS with hardware. So a modern Android phone has so many sensors. It has so many that due to the time limitations, I'm not going to list them, but trust me, all of these are there. The most important ones, and the ones that we've added to sensor messages within the last year, are the magnetometer, the barometer, temperature sensors, ambient light sensors, and then a modern Android phone also has plenty of interaction, or possibly actuators if you'd like to think of it like that. So you have a screen, which are becoming more and more high resolution. You have notification LEDs, you have a speaker, and you have a vibration motor, so you can try to move a little. It also has plenty of computing, so 1 to 4 cores for now, up to 1.7 gigahertz on the Nexus 10. That's the highest I know of currently. They use fairly low power, and they have really good battery life, 4 to 9 hours, and they say that they can do this playing HD movies. So why so many sensors? So originally, they just had an accelerometer, and when you tried to play a game with your accelerometer, then you ended up something like this. So here I'm driving my car, okay, I can turn pretty soon, and hard turn. Okay, try to make sense of that in terms of how the screen's rotating in terms of a short amount of time. So developers had all kinds of fun with that. They did low pass filters, high pass filters, and overall they just generally had a bad time. So Apple and Google, through Android, listened to their demands and they added a gyroscope. And so when you look at a gyroscope, instead of that, what you see is, oh, I have to type. So now we'll compare the two, and the gyroscope is in blue. So now when I turn, you can see that the rate of the turn is in blue. And if we go quickly, or we shake a lot, especially in this direction, you can see that the red goes all over the place, but the blue remains relatively small. So the gyroscope helps with short-term changes, where the accelerometer is good for long-term orientation sensing, and not really orientation of motion. And so using the clever combinations of those two sensors, you can mostly narrow down how a phone's oriented. The last little trick is that you don't know which direction or how far you've turned globally. So what they've added is basically a compass. And this helps with, for apps like 3D Street View, where you can turn and on your phone pretend like you're on a street, or Yelp's Monocle, which helps you identify restaurants on the street you're on. They also added lots of other nice things, like originally the iPhone didn't have GPS. It used cell phone triangulation and said, walk a block that way and then start the directions, please. And then eventually they added GPS for better initialization, and then finally we all now enjoy full turn-by-turn directions on our smartphone. But more problems. GPS doesn't work great indoors, and even when it does, altitude is poor quality just because of how the satellites typically orient themselves. So one way you can fix that is to add a barometer, which measures the barometric pressure, and that roughly correlates to altitude. Indoor localization, especially with smartphones, is a huge priority for the smartphone manufacturers. They've created floored maps of shopping centers so that you can try to identify which floor and which store you're in. And Apple has recently bought Wi-Fi Slam, which was a Palo Alto startup, for $20 million, which focused on indoor smartphone localization. So, okay, that's smartphone. What does that have to do with robots? Well, I'd like to claim that smartphones are now robots. Somewhere between the original iPhone, which was mostly a screen, and a modern device like the Nexus 7, they've basically turned into robots. When they have more sensors than I can list in a 20-minute presentation, that sounds like a robot to me. And they, even like here with the Romo, you can see that they have bases for smartphones too, because the only thing they're really lacking is the motion themselves. So with all those sensors, what's the main thing that a robot gets if it uses an Android phone? So here in RViz, I'm going to show you my Nexus 7 here. So I'll pick it up, and you'll see as I turn it, it matches precisely, because Android has the very complicated accelerometer, gyroscope, and magnetometer sensor fusion built in. So I can take it and just out of the box, I didn't have to write that. I didn't have to buy $1,000 plus IMU. And it comes with all those other sensors. You can buy a Nexus 7 for $200. And it has the screen and everything that you need. If you want to go a little more complex, let's see here. I'm going to try a new demo, which I changed just because of how big this auditorium is. So I'm going to switch to my Nexus 4 in my pocket, which actually is running my Wi-Fi hotspot because I can't get Wi-Fi from the other room. So yet another advantage of the Android for robots. So I'm going to start the sensors driver here. Okay, let's see. Oh. And now I need to zoom out because I added another feature. So what I did here was I very quickly simulated the barometric pressure for the altitude. So now we have orientation and altitude. So if I go here, okay, so now on the chart we see altitude being plotted. So with what Ryan did earlier running around the room, I'm going to try to repeat his experiment. There. So you can see that it's pretty accurate, probably within 10 or 20 centimeters. Oh, and I'm exhausted. Which is more than enough to tell which floor you're currently on in a building. So that's pretty good combined with what they give, with the rest that they give you. I'm only exhausted because I ate up all my minutes by figuring out the screen. I promise. So, how do you use these technologies? So the easiest way with Android is just to install from the Android market. I'm also going to start mirroring older versions on GitHub in case you're actively using the version for research and you don't want me to update and ruin your research with a bug. Source builds are awaiting some ROS Java pull requests that I have pending. These are mostly things for near-field communication and a library called Action Bar Sherlock. Another cool feature I get is due to the Android market, I can see exactly how many people have installed the app. So at this point, I've had over 600 people install this app within the last 2 years. I don't know the usage for most ROS packages, but I think that for a niche one like this is pretty cool. I also get to see exactly what Android version everyone uses. The good news is that we're fairly good adopters. However, even with us, Gingerbread is still at the top. So that's why I still choose to support Android 2.3 and up. But you can see that I think, yeah, the 2 jelly beans are well above ice cream sandwich, so we're at least upgrading. A new So new things this year is that the ROS Java source has been moved to GitHub. So now pull requests are available. We're aiming for stable within ROS release cycles so that Groovy won't change mid-cycle. There are the links if you want to see the sources. I'm trying to get together a birds of a feather meeting for sometime tomorrow, maybe lunch. And we should probably start a special interest group. I know that it's used by Willow Garage, Google, Eugen, and the Turtlebot manufacturers. And then if you'd like to get started, during the ROS Java Hackathon, we did a pretty good job documenting what to do here on the Android Core wiki page. And a few special thank yous for the last year. So Google and Damon Kohler. He was the primary ROS Java developer and still is, and gave us almost everything with ROS Java. OSRF and their intern, Kazuto. He updated the ROS Android apps during his internship. Eugen and Daniel, they are updating and releasing Turtlebot apps, as well as starting to organize the community around ROS Java. And then finally, Axel from the open source community. He took my sensor driver and extended it to support the OpenCV-based cameras on Android. Any questions?